Do you remember when you were a sweet little kid and enjoyed that particular game, and now you're playing it again, and suddenly the illusion falls apart? You weren't as good at it as you thought, so how about this revelation? And in addition to that, the game is kind of meh nowadays. It revives memories and emotions, but sucks in comparison to more modern experiences. This pattern is strong among many people, and it's important to remember it as we try to rank games in a long-running franchise like Mortal Kombat. The opposite thing could also work. So let's not jump to quick conclusions. You see fresh modern visuals and say, wow, this thing is so much better than those ancient pixels. But then you dig deep into the fighting balance and see a depressing hollow behind this superficial beauty. And if you face this opponent, it's just pointless. The grappler is annoying and overpowered. So here's the thing. We're going to try to be as objective as possible with ranking the main Mortal Kombat games. So let's get into it. But before we actually start, would you like to be treated to something special? What's the worst Mortal Kombat game ever? No, it's not part of our real list. To look into the dark pages of the series history, we need to unleash the awfulness of some spin-offs. The worst MK ever is Mortal Kombat Special Forces. It was released unfinished and basically ugly. These adjectives only intensify with time flow. Are you getting weirdly interested? Don't. Stop right there. MK Special Forces is a beat-em-up attempt that had a difficult development period and got very uninteresting levels and combat systems. It's one of the worst games ever. Thank goodness, the main series of proper fighting games for Mortal Kombat never fell even close to that low level. This game was released a few years before Injustice, so the community did not know yet that it's better to keep these universes separated. This attempt to mix MK and DC, no, it isn't bad, it just isn't good enough. Quite surprisingly, this crossover is considered a part of the main series though, the 8th installment. The story here is okay, even if somewhat short, but the fighting gameplay is filled with sacrifices. In some aspects, the game wants to appeal to the core Mortal Kombat fans, like the difficult combo challenge mode, but at the same time, fatalities are simplified and the general amount of violence is decreased as steps toward a more general audience. The biggest problem of Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe is that it tries to please two different playing groups and doesn't succeed with any. Also, some mechanics are weird, like 2D projectiles in a 3D environment. It's so easy to avoid them, and that's why we put it at 12. It's still a fun experience, but maybe a little too casual. Talking of 3D, not so many players love this era of Mortal Kombat. Armageddon is not the first among 3D games of the series, but it has strongly emphasized the general problems of those mechanics. It's about placing quantity over quality. The most obvious thing is having a lot of characters here, 62, which doesn't give you the usual impression of uniqueness in their fighting style. The more you play, the more obvious repetitive patterns become. The gameplay is not perfect, but it was improved in comparison to the earlier 3D installments. But we still rank MK Armageddon at 11th as it brings new problems into the fighting balance, like not really fair air combat and parry systems. Alongside that, the fighting mechanics lack any substantial innovations. On the brighter side, the game has pretty interesting fatalities, when players could prolong the suffering of their victim by properly timing pressing specific buttons. Let's also mention the character creation tool, which opens a lot of options. The transition to 3D was rather innovative, which is why we've placed Deadly Alliance at 10th over Armageddon, despite it coming out before. The game is simply brave in lots of aspects, from retelling the story to abandoning the heritage of the previous Mortal Kombats. It came after the disaster of Special Forces and helped the series to get new powers. Perhaps the developers used the same trick with MK1, in terms of reimagining the fighting mechanics, not saving the franchise. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance brought to life some awesome new characters, like Frost and Kenshi. Having 3 different stances for your fighters is a great new feature, and it opens impressive combo potential. Some of the iconic fighters do not have their classic moves, which may disappoint. As for this point, the game is rather outdated. Many of its mechanics were left behind, the visuals lack the retro-style romance. Yeah, 10th is a good place for Deadly Alliance. The very first game in the series is often praised for setting the ground for the whole Mortal Kombat brilliance. But however grateful we are for this role, it is hard not to see that MK from 1992 is rather too simple and basic. One thing worth mentioning is that the pixel-like visuals were absolutely amazing for such an early stage of the game industry's development. You may not believe what I'm gonna say right now, but that looks so realistic for the 90s kids. And if they played Mortal Kombat, they were very naughty. Enjoying blood and gore in a fighting game wasn't a thing back then, with the dominance of Street Fighter aesthetics. Mortal Kombat changed this, and for this mostly, we rank it in 9th. This 3D game is a direct continuation of Deadly Alliance, and it improved the basic formula a lot. The better features are mainly about the mechanics. The fights feel good and more satisfying. But the general balance, some infinite combos are possible in Deception, which is never a good idea. Imagine finding yourself in such a situation. In addition, there are issues with slow jumps and wake-ups, basically no cool wake-up options. Quite often, Deception is named as the best among all 3D Mortal Kombat games. As we have the whole series here, we give it 8th place. After the brilliant period of the first pixel-like 2D games, the developers started experimenting with 3D environments. These experiments resulted in a few later games, which we ranked lower on our list. As for Mortal Kombat 4, it's kind of an intermediate stage. The game does not embrace the 3D weirdness, and it does not leave behind those nicely elaborated 2D mechanics. But these aspects dictate the pros and cons. The game is, I can't avoid saying it, it's simply ugly. There's no classic clever art style, the visuals are far behind even Deadly Alliance achievements. But the actual fights are quite good, quicker and sharper than ever before. Many cool ideas from the previous era are here. The fatalities are not on the top though. The 2D moveset with a 3D environment, let's just say 7th place is well deserved for MK4. However different Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat are, these series repeat one specific pattern. The first game is somewhat basic, but relatively successful, and it opens the doors to the amazing progress of the second game, which suppresses the original in every aspect. Mortal Kombat 2 is just a great game. Some of its brave improvements include an even wider variety of mind-blowing finishing moves, like a few fatalities per character and the introduction of friendship. Even the fighting basics get better, like having crouching punches and high-low kicks with a better pronounced difference. The combos are somewhat easier to land. All of that brought many people to the game. Some of the iconic characters were born in MK2, such as Katana, Kung Lao, and Shao Kahn. We should probably thank this installment for every game we got after that. So why only 6 then? One game from the classic era performed better in a specific aspect. And the modern games, they sure are based on the original ideas, but the power of new technology and general growth of gaming culture obviously helped the developers produce significantly better experiences. Let's jump into the modern era. I know, many love it, but that is exactly the thing about enjoying a game as a kid, but then realizing it has some flaws. Still, let's start with something that MK from 2011 did right. The idea of 3D fights was abandoned, but there was also no return to the classic 2D. It was the introduction of the modern 2.5 style, which is really cool. The visuals may look rather dark for those who are treated to the beauty of MK11 and MK1, but in comparison to the previous installment, it was a significant step forward. And as for violence, this game stepped above and beyond with the blood and crushed skulls. MK9 is very accessible and gives an impressive depth for skill growth. But at some point, you inevitably realize how imbalanced it is. And slow. Very slow. It's a solid 5th place. It's exactly that classic game I mentioned earlier. It has succeeded in scaling, like Street Fighter, with a few improved versions of the same game to make the lifespan longer. Yes, this gives stronger reasons for the players to develop their skills within one particular title. Otherwise, it has pretty much the same advantages as MK2, taking the original ideas, elaborating on them, and pushing the fighting mechanics to the next level. Mortal Kombat 3 has fewer innovations in comparison to the predecessor, but still has some, like the run button with the corresponding meter. Chain combos are a good step towards beginners to the genre. We get certain interactions with stages too, which was an interesting idea. Not all the core fans love the slightly different art style of MK3. Perhaps it tries to appeal to a bigger audience and looks somewhat childish. We rank Mortal Kombat 3 at 4th, which is a very good place for a game that concluded that wonderful 2D era. This game is excellent. It's brave and bold as Mortal Kombat should be, while being dark and gritty. The visuals look really good. The fights are quick, super aggressive, The variation system opens up many opportunities to highlight a player's personal style and preferences. The online play has been significantly improved in comparison to Mortal Kombat 9, and suddenly the fighting competitions with real people are more accessible and fun. The story mode is somewhat weaker for MKX, and the general beauty does not include some character models. It's probably worth mentioning that D'Vorah comes from this game, and she is a surprisingly disturbing villain, even for Mortal Kombat standards. Cassie Cage and Jackie Briggs were introduced here too, and they are simply cool. Do you remember the comparison I did between MK2 and MK3, mentioning how the third game uses the basic principles of the second and improves them? It's the same case for MKX and MK11. MKX is beautiful, but MK11 is better. The fights feel a bit slower, but they are also more technical. The amount of content we get with the Aftermath expansion is totally impressive. The game introduces awesome innovations, of course. Having two separate meters is a fresh idea, alright, and Fatal Blow with no connection to the meters makes a big difference in fight strategies. Crushing blows open ways to absolutely devastating combos. Mortal Kombat is still fresh enough to not have to describe it in many details. No downsides will be mentioned here. Crypt was overcomplicated in the beginning, but the game is so good, and it has every aspect we love in Mortal Kombat, and we rank it second. There are not too many reasons to place MK1 on top, but it's logical. It has 1 in the name, so we are obliged to rank it first. Also, there are not too many reasons not to do so. Mortal Kombat 1 was released about a month ago as of the recording of this ranking, and it has a super solid foundation and bright promises for an extraordinary development. We think it's enough to give the game the credit. Visually, it's a feast. Never before has the series reached such beauty. Mechanically, it blows our minds with all those cameo assist opportunities and aerial combos. More details on general MK1 techniques and guides on every character can be found on our main platform, DashFight.com. Take a look to boost your progress and successes. Even at this early stage, we can grant MK1 with the title of the best Mortal Kombat game ever. But please, NetherRealm, if you are watching this, don't let us down. We believe in you so much. And that's it. Our ranking for the best Mortal Kombat games up to MK1. What about your ranking? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.